My in-laws handed me a prenup that said, "This is Luke's house. You'll leave with nothing." I'm Nolan Grant, 31, a software engineer who thought I'd hit the jackpot when I fell for Emma Williams, a beautiful doctor from one of the city's most prestigious families. What I didn't expect was her parents cornering me with a prenup just 2 weeks before our wedding, her mother Victoria's cold voice echoing in that marble-floored mansion. "This is Emma's inheritance, and you'll leave with nothing." Standing there in my off-the-rack suit while Emma's father Harold smirked from behind his mahogany desk, I signed that document, never imagining how those words would come back to haunt them, or how my secret $50 million crypto fortune would completely flip their world upside down. Before I continue this journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who judged you by your bank account rather than your character. Growing up in Riverside, a working-class neighborhood where my father Tony ran a small auto repair shop and my mother Lisa worked as a school secretary, I learned early that respect was earned through hard work, not inherited through bloodlines. Our 2-bedroom apartment above the shop wasn't much, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the smell of my mother's homemade dumplings every Sunday evening. My parents immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but dreams and determination. They worked double shifts, saved every penny, and constantly reminded me that education was the key to opportunities they never had. "Smart work beats hard work," my father would say in his broken English while teaching me to code on an old computer he'd bought from a pawn shop. Those late nights learning programming languages while other kids played video games shaped everything about who I became. In high school, I was the quiet kid who spent lunch breaks in the computer lab instead of hanging out with friends. While my classmates worried about prom dates and football games, I was building websites for local businesses and learning about emerging technologies. By senior year, I was making more money from freelance coding than most adults in our neighborhood earned at their day jobs. College was a full-ride scholarship to State University, where I studied computer science and lived in the cheapest dorm available. While my roommates partied and accumulated student debt, I continued freelancing and discovered something that would change my life forever: cryptocurrency. This was 2013, when Bitcoin was still a curiosity, and most people thought digital currency was a joke. I invested every spare dollar from my coding work into various cryptocurrencies, not because I understood the technology completely, but because I recognized the potential for disruption. My engineering mind saw the elegance of blockchain technology, the mathematical beauty of decentralized systems. By the time I graduated, my portfolio was worth more than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. But I kept quiet about my investments. Growing up poor teaches you to be cautious about sudden wealth, to never count your chickens before they hatch. I continued living modestly, working as a software engineer at a tech startup, driving my father's old Honda Civic, and renting a studio apartment in a decent but unremarkable neighborhood. That's where I was in life when I met Emma Williams at a medical conference where I was presenting cybersecurity solutions for healthcare systems. She was in her final year of residency, brilliant and beautiful, with honey blonde hair and eyes that sparkled when she laughed. But what drew me to her wasn't her looks. It was her passion for helping people, her dedication to becoming a pediatric surgeon, and the way she listened intently when I explained complex technical concepts. "You make it sound so simple," she said after my presentation, approaching me with genuine curiosity rather than the polite professional interest I usually encountered. "I've been worried about data security in our hospital systems. Could you explain how blockchain might help protect patient records?" We talked for 2 hours over coffee, and I found myself more captivated by her intelligence than her beauty. She asked thoughtful questions, challenged my assumptions, and shared stories about her work with sick children that revealed a depth of compassion I'd rarely encountered. Our first official date was at a small Italian restaurant in my neighborhood. My choice, because I wanted to see how she'd react to my world, rather than impressing her with expensive places I could easily afford but rarely frequented. She arrived in scrubs, having come straight from a 16-hour shift, apologizing for her appearance while looking absolutely radiant despite her exhaustion. "This place is perfect," she said, genuinely enjoying the simple pasta and wine. "I'm so tired of pretentious restaurants where the portions are tiny and you can't pronounce half the menu." For 6 months, our relationship existed in my world. We went to movies at the discount theater, cooked dinner at my apartment, took walks in the park, and spent quiet evenings with her reading medical journals while I coded. She seemed to genuinely enjoy this simplicity, often mentioning how refreshing it was to date someone who wasn't trying to impress her with material things. I should have recognized the warning signs when she started talking about introducing me to her family. "They're very traditional," she'd say with a slight tension in her voice. "My father is particular about, well, everything. And my mother has very specific ideas about the kind of man I should be with." "What kind of man is that?" I'd asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Someone established, someone from a good family, someone who can provide the lifestyle they think I deserve." She'd looked uncomfortable, even saying it. "But I don't care about any of that. I care about you." The Williams family estate was even more intimidating than I'd imagined. As Emma drove her BMW through the wrought iron gates, up the winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges, I felt increasingly out of place. The mansion was a Georgian masterpiece, all white columns and towering windows, with a circular driveway featuring a fountain that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Wow," I said quietly, trying to process the scale of wealth I was witnessing. "You grew up here?" "I know it's a lot," Emma replied, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Try not to let them intimidate you. They're just people, even if they sometimes forget that." Harold Williams was waiting in the foyer, a tall man with silver hair and the kind of confident posture that comes from never having to worry about money. His handshake was firm but assessing, his eyes immediately taking inventory of my department store suit and scuffed shoes. "So, you're the software engineer," he said, making my profession sound like a curious hobby rather than a legitimate career. "Emma tells us you work with computers." "I develop cybersecurity solutions for healthcare systems," I replied, trying to match his confident tone. "Actually, I've been working on some projects that might interest you, given your involvement in medical device manufacturing." Victoria Williams appeared beside her husband, elegant in the way that only comes from generations of privilege. Her smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes as she looked me up and down, clearly cataloging everything that didn't meet her standards. "How nice," she said in a tone that suggested it wasn't nice at all. "Emma, why don't you show Nolan the garden while I finish preparing dinner?" Dinner was an exercise in subtle humiliation. Every conversation topic seemed designed to highlight the differences between their world and mine. They discussed vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard, charity galas I'd never heard of, and business associates with names that appeared regularly in the financial news. "Nolan works for a startup," Emma said during a lull in conversation, trying to include me. "He's actually very successful." "Startups can be so risky," Victoria replied with a concerned expression. "So many fail within the first few years. It must be difficult to plan for the future with such uncertainty." "I enjoy the challenge," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the condescension. "There's something satisfying about building something from nothing." Harold nodded with the patronizing approval of someone humoring a child's ambitious dreams. "That's admirable. Of course, once you and Emma are married, you'll want something more stable. Family responsibilities change a man's priorities." The assumption that Emma and I would marry, combined with the implicit criticism of my career choices, left me speechless. Emma reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it reassuringly, but I could see conflict in her eyes. After dinner, Harold invited me to his study for brandy and man-to-man conversation. The room was a shrine to success: leather-bound books, awards, photographs of Harold with politicians and business leaders, and a massive desk that dominated the space like a throne. "I'll be direct, Nolan," Harold said, pouring expensive brandy into crystal glasses. "Emma is our only child. She's going to inherit significant wealth, the family business, properties, investments built over 3 generations. We need to know that anyone she marries understands the responsibility that comes with that." "I love Emma for who she is, not what she has," I replied, though I could hear how naive that sounded in this room filled with symbols of accumulated power. "Love is important," Harold agreed, settling behind his desk. "But practical considerations matter too. What do you make annually, if you don't mind me asking?" The question was inappropriate, but refusing to answer would seem defensive. "Including freelance work, about $120,000 last year." Harold nodded as if confirming something he already knew. "Emma's trust fund alone generates more than that in quarterly dividends. I'm not trying to insult you, but you have to understand the disparity we're dealing with." The drive home was tense. Emma apologized repeatedly for her parents' behavior, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind, processing the gap between our worlds that had been so starkly illustrated. "They'll come around," she said as we pulled into my apartment complex. "Once they get to know you better, they'll see what I see." But over the following months, as our relationship deepened and talk of marriage became more serious, the Williams family's attitude toward me only grew more transparent. They weren't subtle about their disapproval. Victoria would suggest eligible bachelors at every opportunity. Dr. Morrison's son just finished his residency at Johns Hopkins, while Harold would drop hints about Emma's need for financial security. The breaking point came when Emma and I got engaged. I'd proposed with a ring I could afford, not a massive diamond, but a beautiful sapphire that reminded me of her eyes. Emma loved it, but Victoria's reaction was telling. "How unique," she said, examining the ring with barely concealed disappointment. "Sapphires are certainly different." The prenup demand came 2 weeks before our wedding, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Harold called, asking me to come to the house alone for a brief discussion about wedding logistics. I found him in his study with Victoria, and a stern-looking man in an expensive suit introduced as their family attorney, Richard Blackstone. The prenuptial agreement was already laid out on Harold's desk, thick with legal language and implications I didn't need a law degree to understand. "This is just a formality," Harold said with false casualness. "Standard protection for family assets accumulated over generations." I picked up the document and began reading, my engineering mind quickly parsing the legal language. The terms were devastating. In the event of divorce, I would have no claim to any property, business interests, or assets that Emma brought into the marriage. The family home where we planned to live after the wedding would remain entirely in Emma's name. Even gifts received during marriage would revert to Emma upon divorce. But the clause that hit me like a physical blow was in Section 12. In the event of dissolution of marriage, the non-Williams spouse shall have no claim to any assets, properties, or investments acquired by the Williams spouse during the marriage, regardless of contribution or duration of marriage. "This is pretty comprehensive," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It basically says I leave with nothing no matter what happens." Victoria spoke for the first time since I'd arrived, her voice crisp and final. "This is Emma's inheritance, Nolan. Money earned by Williams' family blood, sweat, and sacrifice over 3 generations. You'll leave with nothing because you're bringing nothing." The attorney cleared his throat. "Mr. Grant, I understand this might seem harsh, but it's quite standard for families with significant intergenerational wealth. The agreement protects assets while allowing your marriage to proceed." "And if I don't sign?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Harold's expression hardened. Then we'll have to reconsider whether this marriage is in Emma's best interest. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Invitations have been sent, deposits paid, but arrangements can be modified, if necessary. I looked at the three of them, arranged like a tribunal, and realized this had been planned from the moment Emma first mentioned marriage. They'd tolerated me, hoping I was a phase that would pass. When that didn't happen, they'd moved to contain the damage. "I need to discuss this with Emma," I said finally. Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Of course. But Nolan, understand that Emma has always known this day would come. This is how things work in our family." The confrontation with Emma that night was one of the most painful conversations of my life. She was waiting in my apartment when I returned from her parents' house, pacing nervously in the small living room. "They told you about the prenup," she said before I could speak. "You knew?" The betrayal hit me harder than her parents' manipulations. "How long have you known?" Emma's face crumpled. "Since we got engaged. They said it was standard, that every wealthy family does this." I thought. I hoped we could modify the terms somehow. "Modify them how, Emma? The document basically says I'm marrying you for your money and need to be protected against." "That's not what it says," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It says I leave with nothing. Those were your mother's exact words. You'll leave with nothing because you're bringing nothing. Is that how you see me too?" Emma sank onto my couch, tears streaming down her face. "I see you as the man I love. But Nolan, you have to understand the pressure I'm under. This money, this family legacy, it's not just mine. It belongs to future generations of Williams' children. Children we might have together," I pointed out. "Your own children, who would also be mine." I know. Emma buried her face in her hands. "I hate this. I hate that money complicates everything. But if we don't sign, they'll cut me off completely. No trust fund, no inheritance, no family. Is that what you want?" Looking at her crying on my couch, I realized she was as trapped by her family's wealth as I was excluded by it. The difference was that she'd been born into a golden cage, while I was being asked to voluntarily enter one. "What do you want, Emma?" I asked quietly. "Forget your parents. Forget the money. What do you want?" "I want to marry you," she whispered. "I want us to build a life together. Maybe we can sign it, and then never think about it again. Maybe it will just sit in a drawer somewhere, and never matter." 2 sleepless nights later, I made my decision. I would sign the prenup, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Sitting in my apartment with my laptop open, I checked my cryptocurrency portfolio for the first time in weeks. Bitcoin had reached new highs, Ethereum was soaring, and my early investments in smaller altcoins had paid off beyond my wildest dreams. My total portfolio value, $47.8 million. The irony was exquisite. While the Williams family worried about protecting their wealth from a poor software engineer, they had no idea that same engineer was worth more than their entire estate. More importantly, every dollar of my wealth was self-made, earned through intelligence, risk-taking, and perfect timing qualities that no amount of inherited money could buy. I signed the prenup the next day in Harold's study, with Victoria watching like a hawk and Richard Blackstone witnessing every signature. As I handed the document back to Harold, I looked him directly in the eyes. "This is Emma's inheritance," I said, repeating Victoria's words back to them. "And I'll leave with nothing." "I'm glad you understand," Harold replied with satisfaction. If only he knew what I understood. Our wedding was everything Emma had dreamed of and everything I had dreaded. The Williams family spared no expense, creating a lavish affair at the country club with 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. During the reception, I mingled with Emma's family friends, listening to conversations about market portfolios and investment strategies, knowing I could buy and sell most of them, but keeping that knowledge to myself. The honeymoon in Tuscany was perfect. Away from her family's influence, Emma was the woman I'd fallen in love with, curious, compassionate, and completely present. We toured vineyards, explored ancient cities, and spent lazy afternoons making love in our villa overlooking rolling hills. For 2 weeks, I almost forgot about the prenup and the humiliation that had preceded our marriage. Reality crashed back when we returned and moved into the Williams family's starter home, a 4,000 square foot colonial in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Despite being smaller than the family mansion, it was easily worth $2.5 million, a fact Victoria mentioned frequently while helping Emma decorate. "This house has been in the family for 40 years, Victoria said during one of her unannounced visits. "Emma's great-aunt lived here before she passed. It's wonderful to see it occupied by family again." The emphasis on family was clear. I was an occupant, not an owner. The prenup ensured that if our marriage failed, I would leave this house with nothing, regardless of any improvements I made or mortgage payments I contributed to. But I didn't contribute to mortgage payments because there was no mortgage. The Williams family owned everything outright, another reminder of the wealth gap that supposedly defined our relationship. Emma's medical career flourished during our first year of marriage. She completed her residency and began her fellowship in pediatric surgery, working impossible hours but radiating happiness when she talked about her young patients. I supported her completely, attending hospital functions, celebrating her successes, and holding her when she lost patience despite her best efforts. My own career evolved too. I left the startup to launch my own cybersecurity consulting firm, taking on high-profile clients and building a reputation in the industry. The business grew quickly, generating substantial income that I reinvested in cryptocurrency and emerging technologies. My portfolio continued growing, but I maintained my modest lifestyle, still driving the old Honda and wearing off-the-rack suits. The Williams family's attitude toward me remained unchanged. I was tolerated at family gatherings, included in conversations about safe topics like weather and sports, but excluded from discussions about business, investments, or family matters. When Emma received promotions or accolades, they celebrated enthusiastically. When my company landed major contracts or received industry recognition, they offered polite congratulations before changing the subject. The first crack in my facade of indifference came during a family dinner where Harold was discussing a potential acquisition for the family business. The target company was struggling with cybersecurity issues that were affecting their valuation. "It's frustrating," Harold said to Emma and Victoria, ignoring my presence at the table. "The company is undervalued because of these technical problems, but our lawyers can't determine the scope of the risk." I cleared my throat. "What kind of cybersecurity issues are they facing?" Harold looked surprised that I'd spoken. "Oh, some sort of data breach vulnerability. Nothing you'd be familiar with." "Actually, that's exactly what I do," I said evenly. "I could evaluate their systems and provide a risk assessment that would help you determine a fair acquisition price." The silence that followed was telling. Harold exchanged glances with Victoria, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of involving me in family business matters. "That's very kind of you to offer," Victoria said with a patronizing smile. "But I'm sure Harold's team has everything under control." Emma looked mortified. "Nolan is really good at this stuff, Dad. His company just completed a major security audit for City General Hospital." "I'm sure he is," Harold replied dismissively. "But family business requires discretion. That goes beyond technical expertise." The message was clear. I wasn't family, despite the marriage certificate and wedding ring. I was an outsider who happened to be sleeping with their daughter. That night, Emma apologized repeatedly for her parents' behavior. "They're just old-fashioned about business," she said. "They don't mean anything personal by it." But it was personal. Every slight, every dismissal, every reminder that I was a temporary addition to their family rather than a permanent member. The prenup wasn't just a legal document. It was a daily reminder of my supposed inferior status. I began planning. The opportunity came 18 months into our marriage when Emma's schedule became overwhelming. She was working 80-hour weeks at the hospital, studying for board exams, and struggling to maintain any semblance of work-life balance. I suggested she take a sabbatical, maybe travel, maybe just rest. "I can't afford to take time off," she said, exhausted after another 16-hour day. "The fellowship is too competitive. If I fall behind, I might not get the attending position I want." "Money isn't the issue," I said carefully. "I'm doing well enough to support us for a few months if you need a break." Emma's smile was tired but grateful. "That's sweet, but hospital salaries aren't exactly enough to maintain this lifestyle. And I can't ask my parents for money. They already think I'm not focused enough on my career." She had no idea that my cryptocurrency portfolio had grown to over $55 million, or that my consulting business was generating 7 figures annually. To her, I was still the modest software engineer who'd needed to carefully budget for her engagement ring. But her parents' attitude was about to change dramatically. The revelation came during a family emergency. Harold had a mild heart attack during a golf game, and Emma rushed to the hospital where he was admitted. While she dealt with medical decisions and coordinated with doctors, Victoria was paralyzed with worry, unable to focus on anything except her husband's condition. "I should call Richard," Victoria said, referring to their family attorney. "Harold has been handling all the financial matters. If something happens to him, I don't even know where to begin." "Mom, Dad's going to be fine," Emma said, though she looked worried too. "The doctors said it was minor. But we should be prepared," Victoria insisted. "There are business decisions that need to be made, investments that need attention. The acquisition Harold was working on, if he can't complete it, we might lose the opportunity." I'd been quietly observing from the corner of the hospital waiting room, but Victoria's panic gave me an opening I'd been waiting for. "What acquisition is this?" I asked. Victoria turned to me with desperate eyes. "A cybersecurity company. Harold said they had valuable technology but were undervalued because of management problems. He was going to make an offer this week." "Which company?" I pressed. "SecureNet Solutions," Victoria said. "Do you know them?" I almost laughed. SecureNet Solutions was a company I'd been tracking for months, knowing they were prime for acquisition but waiting for the right moment to make my move. Their technology was indeed valuable, revolutionary, but their management team had made critical errors that were driving down their stock price. "I'm familiar with them," I said carefully. "What was Harold planning to offer?" "12 million, Victoria replied, "but without Harold to handle the negotiations." "I could handle it," I said quietly. The silence in the waiting room was profound. Emma stared at me with surprise, while Victoria looked like she'd misheard. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. "I could acquire SecureNet Solutions," I repeated. "I've been watching them for months. I know their technology, their market position, their weaknesses. I could have the deal completed before Harold gets out of the hospital." Victoria's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Nolan, that's very sweet, but we're talking about $12 million. I understand the amount." "You don't have $12 million, Victoria said with the patience of someone explaining reality to a child. I pulled out my phone and opened my investment app, the one that tracked my cryptocurrency portfolio in real time. Without saying a word, I handed the phone to Victoria. Her face went white as she stared at the screen. The portfolio balance showed $58.3 million, with detailed breakdowns of my various investments. Emma peered over her mother's shoulder, her mouth falling open as she processed the numbers. "This can't be real," Victoria whispered. "It's real," I said calmly. "I've been investing in cryptocurrency since college. Those risky startup jobs your husband was so concerned about, they gave me early insight into blockchain technology that most traditional investors missed." Emma was staring at me like I was a stranger. "You've had this much money our entire relationship?" "It's grown over time," I said. "When we met, it was maybe 8 million. Now it's closing in on 60. Victoria was still staring at my phone, scrolling through the various holdings and their values. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. I don't understand most of these. You don't need to understand them, I said, taking my phone back. You just need to understand that I can write a check for SecureNet Solutions right now without it affecting my lifestyle or financial security in any meaningful way. The next few hours were surreal. While Harold recovered from his minor heart attack, joking with nurses and complaining about hospital food, his wife and daughter were processing the fact that the son-in-law they'd dismissed as financially inadequate was actually wealthier than their entire family. Emma pulled me aside during one of Harold's naps. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice a mixture of hurt and amazement. "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. "Would you have loved me more? Would your parents have treated me better? Or would everyone have just seen me as a bank account instead of a person?" Emma couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Her parents' sudden interest in my opinions about business matters was already evidence of how money changed relationships. When Harold was discharged 2 days later, Victoria had already briefed him on my revelation. His attitude towards me underwent a complete transformation, from dismissive tolerance to eager engagement. "Nolan, my boy," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with newfound enthusiasm. "Victoria tells me you've been quite successful with your investments. I'd love to hear about your strategies." The same man who had questioned my ability to provide for his daughter was now seeking my financial advice. The same man who had insisted I sign a prenup to protect his family's wealth was now eager to discuss business partnerships. "I've been thinking about the SecureNet acquisition," Harold continued. "Perhaps we could collaborate on the deal, pool our resources, share the risk." "I don't think that's necessary," I replied. "I've already made an offer. They accepted this morning." Harold's face showed a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect. "You moved quickly." I learned early that opportunities don't wait for committee decisions. Over the following weeks, the Williams family's treatment of me shifted dramatically. Victoria, who had once criticized my department store suits, now asked for my opinion on investment opportunities. Harold, who had questioned my career stability, now introduced me to his business associates as my brilliant son-in-law. Even their social circle, which had previously treated me as Emma's amusing charity case, now sought my advice on cryptocurrency investments and technology stocks. But Emma was struggling with the revelation. Our conversations became strained as she processed not just the money, but the fact that I'd hidden it from her throughout our entire relationship. "I feel like I don't know you," she said one evening as we sat in our expensive house surrounded by the wealth her family had used to define my worth. "How could you keep something this big from me?" "The same way you kept the prenup from me until 2 weeks before our wedding," I replied. "Some things are too important to risk." "That's not the same thing," Emma protested. "The prenup was my parents' idea, not mine. But you went along with it. You let them humiliate me because you thought I needed your family's money more than I needed respect." The truth hung between us like a wall. Emma had married down, or so she'd thought. She'd been the wealthy doctor rescuing the struggling engineer, the princess lifting up the peasant. Learning that the peasant had been secretly richer than the princess all along wasn't just surprising, it was devastating to her sense of identity. "What else haven't you told me?" she asked. "Nothing that matters," I said. "I love you the same way I always have. I'm the same person I was yesterday, before you knew about the money." But we both knew that wasn't true. Money changes everything, especially in families that use wealth as a measure of worth. The final confrontation came 6 months later, during Harold's 60th birthday party at the family estate. The guest list included business leaders, politicians, and society figures who had previously ignored me, but now competed for my attention. I found myself in the surreal position of being courted by the same people who had once dismissed me as unsuitable for their social circle. During the dinner, Harold stood to make a toast. Family is everything, he began, his voice carrying across the crowded room. Tonight, I want to thank my brilliant son-in-law Nolan for his guidance on several successful investments this year. His insights have been invaluable to our family's continued prosperity. The applause was enthusiastic, but I felt sick. Harold was crediting me with guidance on investments I had made independently, using my own money, while he and Victoria watched from the sidelines. They were rewriting history to make themselves seem like partners, rather than people who had discovered my wealth by accident. After dinner, I found myself alone with Harold in his study, the same room where I'd signed the prenup that was supposed to protect his family from my supposed financial inadequacy. "I've been thinking about that prenup," Harold said, pouring brandy with the same ceremonial gravity he'd displayed 2 years earlier. "Given your significant assets, perhaps we should have our attorneys review the document, make sure it's fair to both parties." "Fair to both parties?" I repeated. "You mean fair to me?" Harold's smile was uncomfortable. "Well, yes. When we drafted the original agreement, we weren't aware of your financial position. The terms may be unnecessarily restrictive." I accepted the brandy but didn't drink it. "The terms were designed to ensure I would leave with nothing because I was bringing nothing. Your wife's exact words." "Victoria was just being protective of Emma," Harold said quickly. "You have to understand, we've dealt with people who were interested in our daughter for the wrong reasons. And now you've discovered I was never interested in your money at all," I said. "In fact, I've been subsidizing your daughter's lifestyle without her knowledge for the past 2 years." Harold's expression shifted to confusion. "What do you mean?" "Emma's salary doesn't cover the mortgage on this house, even with your family's help. I've been making up the difference through anonymous payments to avoid hurting her pride. The car she drives, the clothes she wears, the vacations we take, I've been paying for all of it while letting her believe she was supporting our lifestyle with her medical career." The color drained from Harold's face as he processed the implications. "You've been supporting Emma financially?" "I've been supporting your daughter the way a husband should, without making her feel dependent or inferior. The same consideration your family didn't show me." I stood up, setting down the untouched brandy. "You want to revise the prenup? Fine. Here's my revision. I keep everything I brought into this marriage, everything I've earned during this marriage, and everything I'll earn in the future. Emma keeps everything her family gave her. We're equal partners. Or we're not partners at all." Harold nodded eagerly. "That sounds completely reasonable. I'll have Richard draft a new agreement immediately." "No," I said firmly. "We're not drafting a new agreement. We're nullifying the existing one. If Emma and I can't trust each other enough to share our lives without legal protection, then we shouldn't be married." The conversation with Emma that night was the most difficult of our marriage. She was furious about the anonymous payments, humiliated that I'd been secretly supporting her lifestyle, and confused about what our relationship actually meant. "You made me feel like I was taking care of us," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You let me worry about money while you were sitting on a fortune. I let you maintain your independence and dignity," I replied. "The same things your family tried to take from me. By lying to me? By protecting you from the complications that money brings to relationships. Look at how your parents treat me now versus how they treated me before. Look at how our friends act around me now that they know I'm wealthy. Money doesn't make relationships better, Emma. It makes them more complicated." Emma was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd said. "So what happens now?" she asked finally. "Now we decide what our marriage is actually about," I said. "Are we two people who love each other and want to build a life together? Or are we a business arrangement between families with different financial assets?" "I love you," Emma said quietly. "I've always loved you. But I feel like I don't know who you are anymore." "I'm exactly who I've always been," I said. The only thing that's changed is other people's perceptions of me based on my bank account. The question is, are you other people, or are you my wife? The resolution came slowly over the following months. Emma and I entered marriage counseling, working through the trust issues and communication problems that had been building since our wedding. She struggled with feeling deceived, while I struggled with feeling like I was only valued for my money. The breakthrough came when Emma made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. She resigned from her position at the prestigious hospital and took a job at a free clinic in a low-income neighborhood, taking a massive pay cut to work with patients who couldn't afford private health care. "I need to remember why I became a doctor," she told me, "not for status or money or to impress my parents, but to help people who need it most." Her parents were horrified. Victoria called it career suicide, while Harold worried about the type of people Emma would be working with. But Emma was happier than I'd seen her since our honeymoon, coming home each day with stories about patients she'd helped and problems she'd solved. "I finally understand what you were trying to protect me from," she said one evening as we cooked dinner together in our expensive kit grant. "The way money complicates relationships, changes motivations, makes people see you differently. I've been living in that bubble my whole life without realizing it." "And now?" I asked, watching her chop vegetables with the focused precision she brought to everything she cared about. "Now I want to build something real with you, not based on what we have, but on who we are." The prenup was officially dissolved 6 months later, but by then it had become irrelevant. Emma and I had learned to communicate honestly about money, career goals, and family expectations. More importantly, we'd learned to trust each other with our vulnerabilities, not just our strengths. The Williams family gradually adjusted to the new dynamic. Harold still sought my business advice, but he also started asking about my parents and showing genuine interest in my background. Victoria remained somewhat formal, but she stopped making passive-aggressive comments about my origins and even complimented my mother's cooking when my parents joined us for dinner. My parents, meanwhile, were both proud and bewildered by the turn of events. "We raised you to work hard and be honest," my father said during one of our weekly calls. "The money is nice, but what matters is that you found a good woman who loves you." "She does love me," I confirmed, "even when she's furious with me for keeping secrets." "Smart women are often the most challenging," my mother added with a laugh. "But they're worth the effort." 2 years after the prenup drama, Emma and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony attended only by immediate family and close friends. This time, there were no legal documents, no protection clauses, no discussions about who owned what. There was just love, commitment, and the hard-won understanding that trust is more valuable than any amount of money. As we exchanged rings again, I thought about that moment in Harold's study when I'd signed the original prenup, believing I was protecting my secret while they were protecting their wealth. None of us had understood that the real protection we needed was from our own assumptions about what makes a marriage work. Standing there with Emma, both of us older and wiser and more honest than we'd been the first time, I realized that sometimes the best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong, it's proving that their opinion never mattered in the first place. The Williams family had tried to make me sign away my dignity along with any claim to their wealth. Instead, I'd learned that the only wealth worth protecting is the love you build with someone who chooses you not for what you have, but for who you are. And in the end, Emma had chosen me twice, once when she thought I had nothing, and again when she learned I had everything. That choice, more than any amount of cryptocurrency or real estate or business success, was the real treasure I'd been protecting all along. The prenup had said I would leave with nothing. It turned out to be wrong about everything, including the possibility that I would ever want to leave at all.